You know, they have to be really fucking worried about people waking up to the truth and the fact that they're starting to lose control of global order if they're doubling down on censorship and putting the climate change narrative on the back burner.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Before we dive into today's topic, I just wanted to give everyone an update on Monday's episode that we did on the Texas-Mexico border. And we didn't talk about this particular issue, but one of the things Abbott did last year to discourage illegal migrant crossings was he had the National Guard put razor wire up along certain sections of the border. And of course, as they normally do, the Biden admin filed a lawsuit against Texas for this. They said the razor wire was obstructing the Border Patrol's ability to do their job. Again, very familiar narrative. But a lower court ruling barred the federal government from having it removed. Well, on Monday, after the release of our episode, the Supreme Court decided in a 5-4 vote to suspend the lower court's ruling, and they're allowing the Biden administration to remove the razor wire. So Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton responded by saying, quote, "The Supreme Court's temporary order allows Biden to continue his illegal effort to aid the foreign invasion of America. The destruction of Texas's border barriers will not help enforce the law or keep American citizens safe. This fight is not over, and I look forward to defending our nation's sovereignty." And then DPS spokesperson Lieutenant Chris Olivares also commented, and he said, quote, "Texas will maintain its current posture in deterring illegal border crossings by utilizing effective border security measures, such as reinforced concertina wire and anti-climb barriers along the Rio Grande. The logical concern should be why the federal government continues to hinder Texas's ability to protect its borders, all while allowing for the exploitation, dangerous, and inhumane methods of permitting illegal migrants, including children, to illegally cross a dangerous river where many lives have been lost. Texas is the only state using every strategy and resource to protect its sovereignty, combat criminal activity, and discourage illegal immigration," end quote. So just once again, we have the Biden admin cock-blocking Texas.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about the razor wire being dangerous. The river's dangerous. People drown all the time, especially kids. So it's so backwards. It's terrible.
Yeah, so I just wanted to update everyone on that. But today we are talking about our second part of the World Economic Forum in Davos, which the conference ended last week. And if you have not listened to our podcast from Friday, go check it out because we give you the rundown on basically how they're planning to ramp up their one world government agenda in what is going to be a very critical election year for multiple countries around the world, including the United States. And one of the ways they're doing this is with their focus on a global campaign that's centered around censoring what they deem to be misinformation and disinformation. So the elites have now openly declared they're assuming the role of the unelected trustees of the world, and it's up to them to decide what's best for us. And one of the outcomes of this year's conference was confirmation from the EU president, Ursula von der Leyen, that, quote, information censorship is critical to ensure people receive factual information and not opinions, because misinformation and disinformation are what's threatening our world order. So she told Davos attendees, quote, "The top concern for the next 2 years is not conflict or climate. It's disinformation and misinformation," end quote. Stephanie, you know, they have to be really fucking worried about people waking up to the truth and the fact that they're starting to lose control of global order if they're doubling down on censorship and putting the climate change narrative on the back burner.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're in a total state of panic. And I'm loving it because I don't think they're winning, and I think that they know it. And I've been seeing so many people talk about this lately on social media, but the people are finally winning, and the elite's house of cards is beginning to crumble. So I want to look at some stats that Axios published. So when you look at social media interactions of news articles, it's down 50%. Cable news primetime viewers is down 19%. And this was just from 2021 to 2022. So imagine how much worse it is now. Fox News in November of 2023 had an average of 1.7 million viewers per day, and almost all of them were above the age of 55. And our friend who has the epic TikTok account, Cancel This Clothing Co., he does like amazing research, pulls up all the different articles, and he found these numbers. And he was pointing out how he gets more views on just one of his videos per day. Like, this is the tides are turning. And so just imagine comparing this to other people that are even bigger, like Joe Rogan or Andy Frisella. The news can't even come close. And the news is controlled by these elites at Davos. And, it's turned into this dinosaur that no one is watching anymore. And then you look at like the awards ceremonies that are dead and no one tunes into. No one's going to the movies anymore or tuning into TV shows, and instead flocking to social media to communicate with our fellow human beings. So, yes, the World Economic Forum is panicking because the media that they once controlled is now obsolete, and social media is like the wild, wild west. They can't contain and censor 7 billion people. And then you have podcasts that are getting the truth out. And they can try all they want, but like the more that they push with censorship, the more we push back. It's just like every time they arrest Trump, he gains more popularity. The elite class is shifting, and nothing that they come up with in Davos is going to stop it unless we cave in. And like that's the number one thing that I want our audience to get from this podcast. Don't cower down, don't stay silent, be unapologetically outspoken because it's working. But everyone needs to join the movement. Everyone needs to stand up for freedom, stand up against the elite class and the power hungry, evil billionaires, and help usher in a new future of freedom. And along with that comes abundance. And so, this same TikTok creator that I was talking about that I absolutely love and love to have on the podcast, he also pointed out two people who were being sued by some of these mega corporate elites. And one was the case of Tiffany Cianci, who was attacked in court by multiple of these elites. And because of TikTok, she reached millions of people and won the case. And then you have the case of Amy Nelson, whose husband was being sued by Amazon, by Jeff Bezos. And 4 years later, they won thanks to her social media accounts that exposed what people like Jeff Bezos are doing. And so we have the power, but we have to use it. And we all need to speak up and use our voice for good if we want to keep winning. And they see that in Davos. And that is why they're panicking. And that is why every single conversation had to do with social media, censorship, and quote, disinformation.
Yeah, and what's really fucked is like they're the ones who get to decide what qualifies as misinformation and disinformation. And it'll be the same play that they did with COVID, the same narrative that they're censoring us for our safety and our protection, and it's all under the guise of maintaining freedom and democracy. And like if you go on the World Economic Forum website, you can read transcripts directly from this conference in Davos where they are literally telling us how they're going to increase online and social media censorship. And I am so sick of the fucking word democracy being used as a code word for socialism and communism, because we all know that's what their version of democracy means. And the CEO for the Center of Democracy and Technology, Alexandra Reeves Givens, she gave a talk in Davos, where she said that threats to democracy are on an incline. And you've got social media companies like Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, and X, and they've all reduced their information trust and safety standards and let go of personnel that handle those jobs. And they all did this in 2023. So what we need to do is we have to put political pressure on these companies so that they will increase their standards again, because interventions that they have right now, like, if you click on an article and it'll say sensitive content, are you sure you want to view this? Or you'll read it and it'll be like a whole fact checking thing. She said these are, quote, bare minimum essentials for 2024. So if you guys think we're being censored now or shadow banned or whatever word you want to use, like stand by, because it's only going to get worse. And especially when it comes to how they plan to handle the impending disease X that we spoke about on Friday, which, if you haven't heard, it's the next pandemic that Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab have literally told us is impending in our future this year, and how it's going to be deadlier than anything humanity has ever faced. And part of their global agenda with this new pandemic is they're trying to centralize every country to be under control of the World Health Organization. And there's this new worldwide pandemic treaty. The Epic Times reported that the 194 member nations of the WHO, which includes the United States, they're all working on what they're calling a quote zero draft of the WHO pandemic accord, and they're working on it to make amendments to existing international health regulations. And so, of course, they're pushing it as these amendments are all necessary in the name of equity for all countries so that they can create a quote whole of government and whole of society end quote approach to how they handle pandemic response. So the Director General of the WHO, we mentioned him last week, Tedros Ghebreyesus, he spoke at the WEF on Wednesday, and he said he hopes this new amendment will be signed by all countries by May. And yes, the WHO is also part of the global censorship agenda to tackle the misinformation, disinformation threat, because their new pandemic draft explicitly states that member nations will, quote, conduct regular social listening and analysis to identify the prevalence and profiles of misinformation, end quote. Social listening, Stephanie, like that's a new term I haven't heard before.
Well, and what I want to know is why is the WHO or the CDC still a thing? I mean, we know that they flat out lied, and their censorship with COVID-19 got a lot of people killed. I mean, they censored information that could have saved lives. They censored information about the very real side effects of the vaccines. So why are we listening to them? This is just absolute insanity. And I mean, yeah, social listening, like that's spying on citizens. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. And it's just like the fact that they think that they could just go and put this out there and everyone's going to go along with it is insane. I think at one point in time, people would have, but too many people are awake to the bullshit now. And I have bad news for them because House Republicans have proposed a bill to prohibit the US from funding the WEF. And according to The Blaze, Republicans held a press conference where they stood up to the elites in Davos. And in the press conference, Scott Perry, who is a representative of Pennsylvania, said, quote, the World Economic Forum doesn't deserve 1 cent of American funding, and it's past time we defund Davos. And then Tom Tiffany of Wisconsin added, quote, the Defund Davos Act would ensure that U.S. tax dollars are not funding the World Economic Forum and their reset on our way of life. I thank Congressman Perry for leading the important effort, end quote. Tara, it blows my mind how many things we're funding, number one, but why the
Yep.
hell are we spending taxpayer dollars funding an organization filled with the richest people in the world?
Yep.
This is insane. Like, shouldn't they be the ones funding their own little club? I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. And I think that every politician needs to start doing this, bring it to our attention, stand up to it. They only have control because, again, like we're letting them have control. And one thing that we could all do is put pressure on our representatives to stop the bullshit like this. And there was one woman a while back when they were going through like that TikTok ban, and she called her representative about like saying, don't vote for the TikTok ban. And he basically told her to go eat dirt. So she posted his office number and email on TikTok, and he was inundated with thousands of calls and emails and ended up listening and voting against the TikTok ban. So, like, this is, again, is the power of social media and the power that our voice has. And we need to use it because it works. And they can't censor every single person, they can't censor, 7 billion people.
You're absolutely right. But like one of the other things that we're going to have to deal with is when AI starts being used and how that's going to impact social media. And like this was one of the main topics at the World Economic Forum this year. And we talked on Friday about how a lot of panels were focused on concerns about AI being used to interfere with elections and create false propaganda, the whole misinformation, disinformation campaign. And I think that's accurate also in terms of like what we do, because AI can easily take our voices, generate shit we didn't say, and it can do that for anybody. And so that's a scary thing, at least in my mind. And one of the other things that like the elites seem to be concerned about is we've talked about the dangers of AI's capabilities. And Futurism reported that the Chinese premier Li Qiang gave a speech at the conference where he said, quote, human beings must control the machines instead of having the machines control us. AI must be guided in a direction that is conducive to the progress of humanity. So there should be a red line in AI development, a red line that must not be crossed, end quote. And I'm laughing because as I'm reading that, I see Stephanie rolling her eyes. And it's true because like this is coming from China, really. The country where most of the AI and robot horror stories that we speak about are always taking place. And this article also reported that OpenAI CEO Sam Altman went to Davos this year for the first time. And he said, quote, the OpenAI style of model is good at some things, but not good at sort of life and death situations, end quote. No shit, really? And then Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, which is a company that's like very heavily invested in AI, he said, quote, we don't want to have a Hiroshima moment. We've seen technology go wrong and we see Hiroshima. We don't want to see an AI Hiroshima or Hiroshima, however you want to pronounce it. End quote. So like, then maybe we stop fucking creating AI and robots that are becoming more intelligent and more powerful than humans.
Yeah.
Like, I keep reading all these insane stories that freak me out. And we haven't done an AI episode in a while, but I'm going to just bring up two quick stories. Futurism reported last week that researchers at Google-backed AI firm Anthropic, they're now able to train AI with what they call exploitable codes. And this means that the AI can be triggered to prompt negative or like strategically deceptive behavior using words that are like totally benign. And then once the model is trained, it's exceedingly difficult and sometimes impossible to remove the training. So the article was saying that researchers found that any attempts they made to rein in and reconfigure a deceptive model can actually reinforce its bad behavior instead. And once the AI is capable of learning, quote, how to better hide its transgressions, in other words, once a deceptive model turns on its creators, the change may be for good, end quote. And then
That's
news,
terrifying.
right. I know. A new scientist reported that scientists in Ireland have now created a true life Terminator robot because it has a DNA computer that can assemble itself and it can detect, the robot can detect if it's been stabbed. It can then self heal and continue moving. Like, what in the actual fuck? The scariest thing that everyone should be concerned about is like, all this crazy AI technology that's coming out and how it's going to be used for military capabilities, because that's some scary shit.
Oh my God, we need to do another AI episode because these stories are so fun, even though they're so
I know.
terrifying. But yeah, when China is warning us that there's some real
Right.
problems because they don't really have any limitations. But speaking of military capabilities, this is pretty concerning. So we know that NATO and the World Economic Forum are basically all the same group of people controlling the world. So I'm going to talk about some big news that just came out where NATO is conducting its largest military exercise since the Cold War, with 90,000 troops, more than 50 ships, 80 fighter jets, helicopters, and drones, 1,100 combat vehicles, including 133 tanks and 533 infantry fighting vehicles. So listen to what the top commander, Chris Cavoli, just announced.
Under 24 will be the largest NATO exercise in decades, with participation from approximately 90,000 forces from all 31 allies, plus our good partner, Sweden. The alliance will demonstrate its ability to reinforce the Euro-Atlantic area via transatlantic movement of forces from North America. This reinforcement will occur during a simulated emerging conflict scenario against a near-peer adversary. Steadfast Defender 24 will be a clear demonstration of our unity, our strength, and our determination to protect each other, to protect, of course, our values and the rules-based international order.
So I like how he said international order at the end,
Right.
to protect their new world order, right?
Mhm.
So according to Reuters, they are rehearsing how the US could help defend Europe if Russia attacks. So I don't know, Tara, to me, it sounds like they're gearing up for World War III.
Yep.
And I'm going to play another clip. This is from that same press conference with NATO. It's the NATO Military Committee that made this announcement. And so this clip is going to be Admiral Rob Bauer, and he is telling citizens to prepare.
The understanding that it is more than the military that has to be able to operate in a conflict or in a war. It is the whole of society that will get involved, whether we like it or not. That realization, we didn't talk about that much a year ago. If you look back to last year, what has happened in our alliance with regard to the battle groups that we set up, if you look back to the training, the fact that we now have Steadfast Defender with 90,000 troops, that is a record number. That is a record number of troops that we can bring to bear and have an exercise with in that size. Across the alliance, across the ocean, from the US to Europe, in Europe. That is a big change. Surprised, and as a result, buy a radio on batteries. That is great. It is part of the package that the Swedish government is talking about. You need to have water, you need to have a radio on batteries, and you need to have a flashlight on batteries to make sure that you can survive the first 36 hours. Things like that. That's simple things. But it starts there. The realization that not everything is plannable, not everything is going to be hunky-dory in the next 20 years. I'm not saying it is going wrong tomorrow, but we have to realize it's not a given that we are in peace. And that's what.
Okay, so
Wait, not everything is plannable unless it's the World Economic Forum planning it.
exactly. Like when NATO admirals are telling people to become preppers, I think it's time to realize this is no longer a conspiracy theory. Like we all need to prep. And notice how he said that Sweden has told their citizens already to be prepared. So while our government is worried about gender identity and letting everyone in the open border, other countries are coming up with a plan for their citizens. And did you know that Russia has bunkers for all of its population in the event of a nuclear war? Like
Everybody?
this is everyone, every
Wow.
single citizen. So according to the Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations, there is space in underground facilities for all of the population in the event of a nuclear attack. Do you think they have that here in the US? Well, they do, but you're only getting in if you're high up in the government or a billionaire that has the funds to get in or build one yourself. And if that's not a wake-up call to the ignorant identity politics in this country, then like I don't know what would be. You know, we've become weak. We have attacked masculinity. We've made our military so unattractive to any, masculine, patriotic type of person, all in an effort to be inclusive. You have Biden that's let 8 million people into the US illegally, many of whom probably could be sleeper cells. And, we already know there are mostly military aged males. And the media is making people worry about Trump when the real threat is Russia, from what NATO is telling us. And the best chance that we have in like that type of a scenario is Trump being in charge. I mean, think about it. He did a great job of keeping us out of war while he was president. The border was more secure than it had been in 40 years. No countries messed with us. We had peace in the world. He stood up to NATO and the World Economic Forum. And he was respected by not only Putin, but Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un. And we had a strong military, a thriving economy, and we were becoming more independent in terms of our manufacturing and our energy. So my whole point of this is that everyone needs to wake the fuck up and quit worrying about Trump's tweets. He's not even on Twitter anymore. Instead, we need to get real about who's going to keep our country safe. And that needs to be the number one priority in who you vote for in 2024. I think everyone can agree that the person is Trump. Whether you love him or hate him, he is the one that will protect this country in some type of a conflict like this, because there's no denying he loves this country. And based on 4 years under him versus Biden, we sure as hell are a lot safer with Trump than with Biden. And this isn't to like scare anyone, because I do want to point out that this whole drill is bringing US troops to Europe. So this is like protecting Europe from Russia. So here in the United States, they're not like amping up for anything, but this is, still a very big thing, because if that happens, we know that means World War III. And then when our troops are over in Europe, then what are we, sitting ducks like here? So it's just something that we need to focus on and just get rid of the identity politics and think about this election and the very real consequences of it. And it's not, anything having to do with pronouns. This is having to do with like surviving and our national security. And so you need to pick the person that can handle that situation best. And Biden is not the one. He can't even walk up a damn flight of stairs. So anyhow, instead of listening to the dinosaur media, like use common sense, right?
Yeah, and you know what? Trump was a big topic of the World Economic Forum, and it's very clear that they're concerned that if he gets elected, the global agenda like goes off the rails. So we already know what DeSantis dropped out of the race now on Sunday. So it's down to Trump and Nikki Haley, and the clear front runner is Trump. And if Nikki Haley wins, that's obviously fucking election fraud, because she's the, Democrat media darling. But if Trump wins, he will definitely impact global politics, because he will impact the direction of the Russia-Ukraine war. And that is a huge issue for NATO and for the World Economic Forum. Fox News reported that on the last day of the World Economic Forum on Friday, Bloomberg asked several world leaders how they would prepare for the possibility of Trump being reelected and how this would fragment foreign policy. And they all gave like these very carefully crafted responses, where they were talking about the need to be prepared to defend and strengthen themselves. Like Trump's going to attack Europe. No, it's because Trump would re-strengthen America and not be a weak little bitch to the rest of the world the way Biden is. And I was reading this article in Alaska Native News, and they were talking about how the president of France, Macron, he was asked on Wednesday about what his response would be if Trump was elected. And he basically said that if that happens, Europe needs to be prepared, because it will have a huge impact on the direction of the war. And Trump has been very outspoken, saying that he would make an immediate peace deal with Putin and end the war if he's elected. And it's the Republicans in Congress who are blocking like another $50 billion in military aid to Zelensky from the United States. And so the former head of policy planning at NATO gave a statement and said, quote, "The U.S. has a very predominant, if not the lead role when it comes to the strategic political questions on Ukraine. So losing the U.S. in the sense of having a U.S. president who might actually be counter to Ukraine's interests and to Europe's interests would be a major blow," end quote. So last week, Trump did a town hall meeting where Fox News asked him if he would commit to the U.S. remaining a member of NATO if he's elected. And Trump's response was, quote, "Depends on if they treat us properly. NATO has taken advantage of our country. The European countries took advantage. They took advantage of us on trade, and they took advantage of us on our military protection," end quote. So not only is it a threat to the Biden administration's plan to destroy America, but it's also a threat to the entire global agenda if Trump gets elected. And so I want to play this clip. It comes from Kevin Roberts. He's the president of the Heritage Foundation. And And this is what he said in Davos on Thursday. And these are just some clips of his speech. And it was like a straight up mic drop speech.
Would describe Davos as protecting liberal democracy. It's standing up for it. It's equally laughable to use the word dictatorship at Davos and aim that at President Trump. In fact, I think that's absurd. But I'm going to step aside from that constructive criticism and instead answer your question. Yep. And I'm going to be substantive here. President Trump, if he's the next president, for that matter, I think whoever the next conservative president is going to take on the power of the elites, which I mentioned earlier. But the thing that I want to drive home here, the very reason that I'm here at Davos, is to explain to many people in this room and who are watching, with all due respect, nothing personal, but that you're part of the problem. Political elites tell the average people on 3 or 4 or 5 issues that the reality is X, when in fact reality is Y. Take immigration. Elites tell us that open borders and even illegal immigration are okay. The average person tells us in the United States that both rob them of the American way of life. They're right. President Trump will take that on behalf of the average American. Elites also tell us that public safety isn't a problem in big American cities. Just travel to New York or Washington or Dallas, Texas. The average person will tell you that the lack of public safety damages not just the American way of life, but their life. President Trump will take that on. Thirdly, I guess the favorite at the World Economic Forum is climate change. Elites tell us that we have this existential crisis with so-called climate change, so much so that climate alarmism is probably the greatest cause for mental health crisis in the world. The solutions, the average person know, based on climate change are far worse and more harmful and cost more human lives, especially in Europe during the time that you need heating, than do the problem and the problems themselves. Fourth, 2 more here, Robin. Okay. The fourth, China. The number one adversary, not just to the United States, but to free people on planet Earth. Not only do we at Davos not say that, we give the Chinese Communist Party a platform. Count on President Trump ending that nonsense. And fifth, as we sit here, another supranational organization, the World Health Organization, is discussing foisting gender ideology upon the global South. These are practices that are under review, if not being rejected, by countries in Northern Europe. The new president, especially if it's President Trump, will, as you like to say, trust the science. He will understand the basic biological reality of manhood and womanhood. And do you know why? Not because of retribution, not because he's a dictator, but because he has the power of the American people behind him. And it's connected to Senator Portman's excellent point that in addition to needing a vigorous executive, we look forward to having the popular will inform both the House and Senate in 2025 to pass laws on all of those issues and many others. Ultimately, Robin, I think President Trump, if in fact he wins a second term, is going to be inspired by the wise words of Javier Milei, who said that he was in power not to guide sheep, but to awaken lions. That's what the average American and the average free person on planet Earth wants out of leaders.
Epic clip, right? Awaken lions. I fucking love that. And I agree that that's exactly what Trump would do for us. So I know we kind of went in different directions on this episode, but it's all relative because the World Economic Forum and NATO and elections around the world are all critical issues this year. So with that, we will leave you for today and we will see you back here on Friday.
If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.